Johnny Fontaine ruined one of Walt International's most valuable proteges. For 5 years, we had her under training, singing lessons, acting lessons, dancing lessons. I spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on her. I was going to make her a big star. And let me be even more frank. Just to show you that I'm not a hard-hearted man, that it's not all dollars and cents. She was beautiful. She was young. She was innocent. She was the greatest piece of ass I've ever had, and I've had them all over the world. And then Johnny Fontaine comes along with his olive oil voice and giddy charm. And she runs off. She threw it all away just to make me look ridiculous. And a man in my position can't afford to be made to look ridiculous. Now you get the hell out of here. And if that goomba tries any rough stuff, you tell him I ain't no band leader. Yeah, I heard that story.
Thank you for the dinner and a very pleasant evening. Maybe your car could take me to the airport. Mr. Corleone is a man who insists on hearing bad news immediately.
This guy Waltz just decides to make a fool of himself on principle after he shows Tom his prized horse. Ooh, boy, that's not something you do, man. You know who these people are! Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Cinema Psych podcast where psychology meets film. I am your host, Dr. Alex Swan, and in this episode, I'm going to make you an offer that you cannot refuse. That's my little play on the often used phrase and quote from this film, all about the mafia. We're going to be diving into The Godfather, Francis Ford Coppola's 1972 drama about the Italian mafia in the United States. Boy, howdy, is this a phenomenal piece of film. To give you some background, just in case you haven't been subsumed within American movie culture listening to this podcast, this is the gangster film, in my opinion. Yeah, there are Goodfellas. Yeah, there's Casino. This is the gangster film. And if you add 1974's follow-up of Godfather Part 2, then you have what I would consider to be the best representation of popular culture surrounding the mafia in all of cinema. Even Italian dramas made of the Sicilian mafia doesn't hold a candle to this film, in my opinion. That's, of course, my opinion. I am a Godfather follower. Don Vito is my Godfather. He's my Godfather. In any case, as I said, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, co-writer with the book writer of the same name, The Godfather, Mario Puzo. In fact, the opening title sequence starts with the phrase Mario Puzo's apostrophe S, The Godfather. Just to tell you that this is the story brought about by Puzo. 1969, so it took about 3 years once the novel was released for the film to come out, and it has a wonderful ensemble cast with some folks near the ends of their careers, or maybe at the height, and then some folks at the beginning of their amazing careers. So we've got Marlon Brando as Don Vito Corleone. Okay, he plays the Godfather in this, but of course his story is coming to an end in this novel. Godfather Part 2 takes you back in time to his life in Sicily, where he's played by Robert De Niro. We're not really talking about Godfather Part 2, but I think those two stories are connected enough with 2 years difference between those two stories. I think those two combined, yeah, there is Godfather Part 3, but it's the most inferior, and it doesn't come out for another 16 years, 1990. Like, Al Pacino is like remarkably different looking in The Godfather Part 3. They keep pulling me back in. Anyways, it tells you how much I love these movies. So Al Pacino, as I said, plays Michael Corleone. I would say Vito's favorite son. He's not his only son, because James Caan, rest in peace, recently deceased, plays Santino, or Sonny Corleone, is the oldest and in line to take over the quote-unquote family business from Vito. Okay. Richard Castellano, Robert Duvall in an amazing role as Tom, the consigliere, Sterling Hayden, John Marley, Richard Conte, and again in a fresh role as Kay, Michael Corleone's love interest, then off when he's in hiding in Sicily, and then on again when he's like, I need you with me. Diane Keaton playing Kay. A few other bit roles here and there, but that's those are the meat of the main speaking roles. Okay, so we are gonna jump in to a discussion about this film, its cultural touchstone, its inclusion as in the Library of Congress in 1990 in the National Film Registry, one of the greatest films, actually currently ranked the second greatest film behind Citizen Kane by AFI, the American Film Institute. And of course, as I said, it spawned 2 years later, Godfather Part 2, and then 16 years after that, Godfather Part 3. At the Academy Awards, the film won Best Picture in 1973. Best Actor, Marlon Brando won, and that was the award where he sent in the Native American woman to accept his award on his behalf in sort of a protest, or not accept it, something like that. And Best Adapted Screenplay, and both Puzo and Coppola won for that. It was nominated for 7 other nominations, including Best Supporting Actor for Al Pacino, Scott Conn. It's not Scott Conn. James Caan and Robert Duvall. They were all nominated in that one category. None of them won, which is quite funny. And then Francis Ford Coppola for Best Director. He did not win that year either. Honestly, considered one of the greatest and most influential films ever made. And I think as far as the mafioso films go, the gangster films like American Gangster with Denzel Washington, when you compare that to, mafioso movies and gangster films that are purely based on Italian American mafia, this stands alone, folks. This stands alone. The first 10, 15, 20 minutes of this movie is centered on Vito Corleone and his obligation to redress any favor asked of him because it is his daughter Connie's wedding. I mean, just you watch that part by itself, and then you can kind of cut it off, and then find your way back to sort of the last 30 minutes where we have probably one of the best cut scenes in all of cinema. My opinion, of course, best cut scenes of the baptism of Michael Corleone's godson, interspersed with murder scenes featuring all of the family's enemies. These are the dons of the 4 other families on the East Coast. And then, of course, Michael wants to broaden his horizons into Las Vegas. So we're going to jump in. We're going to talk about the massive criminality that is a feature of gangster films with an expert in psychological criminality and related ideas. And then we'll talk a little bit about the social psychology of this film too. I mean, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance, let me tell you. So sit back, relax, and join us for a discussion of The Godfather. My guest host today is Dr. John Mandracchia. John earned his Ph.D. in counseling psychology from Texas Tech University. He's a professor of psychology at Avila University, where he's also the director of the Masters of Science in Counseling Psychology program. His areas of research include criminogenic thinking, which are cognitive patterns that perpetual criminal and other rule-breaking, irresponsible behavior, and also better understanding factors that drive suicide ideation and behavior. He's been a fan of psychology for a long time and a fan of movies for even longer. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. I'm excited to be here. I love talking about psychology, but this has just been a really good excuse for me to rewatch The Godfather. It's been at least a decade since I've seen it, and I was just long overdue for it. So it was a real treat for me to prep for this.
You're welcome. Considering that, and this was a little tidbit that I wanted to toss in with you here, which was, did you see Barbie?
No, I didn't.
No. Okay. So there's a wonderful scene where President Barbie, played by Issa Rae, distracts one of the Kens by getting details of The Godfather incorrectly, which causes him, I think this is the one played by Simu Liu, and it causes to distract him. And so he like mansplains The Godfather to her. And so there was a big cultural joke about, mansplaining and particularly this movie that we're talking about. So I wanted to bring that up. I didn't include it in my intro, but I thought I'd clue you in on that one because it is a funny little reference. Considering that we're two dudes now going to talk about The Godfather, we're not going to be mansplaining, but we are going to be like explaining, and we are men. So
just regular explaining.
Regular explaining, yes. So John, it's good to have you on, and I know that you are a professor, and so how's your fall semester getting started?
It's been super busy, but it's been great. So I generally have been teaching in the graduate program at Avila. The past few years, I haven't had as much opportunity to teach undergraduates. So now I'm teaching a general psychology course after several, I think maybe 2 years off.
Yeah.
And I love it. It's so fun to see people engage with psychology who haven't really before, who don't know things that I think are kind of givens, like there are some people who haven't even heard of Freud. And I'm like, how have you not heard of Freud?
Right.
But why would they have, Like,
Sure.
There's movie references and all of that. But if you don't know who it is, it doesn't land,
Yeah. I've been thinking about this, and I think specifically, this applies to like films like The Godfather, which is like very culturally, is a cultural consensus in many people's minds. They think of a gangster movie and they're like, The Godfather. Nowadays, it's hard to find that cultural consensus. We're all watching a ton of disparate things, like everything from Squid Game to Peacemaker to really weird indie stuff like Severance on Apple TV. And it's just like we're all over the place. So I get it. They haven't heard of Freud because they're not experiencing all of the things that you and I experienced growing up, and all of the references to Freud, Freudian slips, all of that stuff. So I get it. But how's the difference between teaching graduate students who are more mature, who are closer, let's say, to their career goals, to mostly, I would imagine, freshmen?
Yeah. My general psychology course is, I think, exclusively freshmen, maybe a sophomore. I think the major difference is that they are less interested in psychology. A lot of them aren't. Most of them are not psychology majors or minors. They're taking it because they have to, or it's just what fits best with their schedule, or it sounded the least bad of whatever options they have to, check the box for that requirement. So I feel like I have to work a lot harder to get them interested and engaged. But then it's cool because, we'll cover something like, biopsychology and talking about neurons. And I can just see, as I put the slide up, they're like, oh man, I don't want to hear about this. But then the more we talk about it, I find that most of them are actually interested in it, which is really cool, as opposed to the grad students who are already invested. They're already interested.
Right.
They're there because of their background and because of their career goals.
Yeah.
They're all in. And that's fun in obviously a different way, because they sometimes know stuff that I don't, which is amazing. They'll talk about, oh, have you heard this thing? This new approach to counseling. And they'll have training that wasn't even available when I was in grad school. And so that keeps me on my toes.
Yeah, that's really cool. And does your program afford like internships, placements, practica, that kind of thing?
The graduate program, it's a clinical training program. So the practicum and internship are a requirement. So they have to have a certain amount of clinical hours where they're doing mental health services under the supervision of a licensed person. So yeah, they're not just getting their education, they are training to become a licensed mental health professional.
Excellent. So let's pivot here to how a clinical psychologist like yourself and a movie about the mafia come together. So before we talk about the psych of the movie, which closely aligns with your background, what do you think about The Godfather in general? I gushed about it in the intro, so I'm not going to belabor the point here. But what do you think about it?
I love it. I just love it. And I can't be objective about it because I just can't. I pretty literally grew up on The Godfather. I grew up in the 80s where parents weren't so concerned about what was appropriate for their kids to watch.
Right.
So I've been watching The Godfather since literally before I can remember. And we used to watch it, I mean, not every year maybe, but not far off from that. It was a staple in our house. My parents would quote it all the time. And I, again, hadn't seen it in about a decade. So as I'm watching, I'm like, oh, I forgot. My dad used to say this line all the time in context that made sense. And sometimes they didn't make sense. But it was, more than just a handful of lines, really obscure lines that don't stand out, I think, even in the movie, that they would just say for no reason. So I just have this really kind of sentimental value of The Godfather. Plus, I'm an Italian American, so there's that whole thing. My grandparents, my dad's parents specifically, from Italy. My mom's great grandparents, I think, were from Italy. My paternal grandfather is Sicilian, so there's a lot of these connections here. My parents grew up in New York. They grew up in Brooklyn, so they would share stories about the actual mafia presence there. So it's this whole mix of like, the mafia is cool anyway, and I don't mean cool like good, but interesting for sure. It's a phenomenon. Plus, the background that my parents have, watching it growing up, it's just such a great movie for all those reasons. But I will say there are times where I will grow up watching a movie, and then after a decade, I won't have seen it, and I'll go back and see it and go, this isn't really as good as I remember it. Or like, oh, people thought that was okay. So just watching it within the last week, it holds up. It's really fun. It's really engaging. It's such a good movie. I stand by that for sure.
I rewatched it last week in prep for today, and it's 3 hours. It's a slog if you try to do a sitting. I think I've got you beat on. I think it's been a couple of decades since I last watched it. I went maybe even more than that, actually. But like I mentioned with the Barbie thing, it still manages to remain like embedded into culture, like you said, with the quotes and the lines and all of that stuff, and many of which are like embedded, like making an offer he can't refuse. Ted Cruz even invoked it last week or the week before when he was talking about the Jimmy Kimmel thing. This is a completely dated reference, but by the time people listen to this on an ongoing basis, it's going to be like, Jimmy Kimmel, what happened with that? Ted Cruz. Anyways, like he even used it then. So I mean, it's still with us.
Yeah.
And I remember the first time I watched it, I was like, oh my God, Marlon Brando, what is going on with you? I learned about how he was just an awful person on set, and he specifically said he wanted the things in his cheek, the gauze in his cheeks, to make his cheeks full and fat. And I was just like, this movie is so good, but also like very strange. But if you can sit through the 3 hours, and now you can probably not have to sit through the 3 hours, you can come back to it like in 20-30 minute chunks. It's a great vignette setup, I think. Now, looking back on it, like you can watch the first 20 minutes and then be like, okay, yeah, that was a great vignette. And then you come back and you watch the next vignette and then the next vignette. And it's like a series of vignettes. And I assume that's how Puzo wrote it, and that's how they translated it to the screen. But it does make it a little bit more digestible. And I think that serves it well for being 3 hours. Nobody's talking about The Irishman. I'm sorry, Scorsese. Nobody's talking about, being able to go back to a 3 hour, almost 4 hour movie, The Irishman, and being like, yeah, that's a good mafioso movie. No. It's just long. This one is long, but it's good.
Yeah, I think there's kind of this idea that if a movie is long, it must be important. And sometimes that's not so much true, right? It's just a lot. People just put stuff in. You're like, I don't understand why they felt the need to do all this. I don't think I have a problem sitting through long movies at all. And I could have sat down. I didn't end up watching The Godfather start to finish in one sitting. I feel like I could have with no problem. It's not a quick paced movie at all.
No.
But it, to me, didn't feel slow. It didn't feel boring. I didn't feel myself grabbing for my phone to scroll through Facebook or whatever because there was a slow scene. It holds up as an engaging movie in an era where we have things moving a lot faster.
Yes, and I think for younger audience members who may be coming to this movie for the first time, do need to reconcile that it's not going to move quickly. The 3 hours are 3 hours, but the pacing's good. Like I said, the vignette from one vignette to the next, the pacing is good, but you also have to pay attention to these relationships as well, right? We've got a lot of names. They use Santino sometimes to refer to Sonny, and then they use Sonny to refer to Sonny, and you're like, wait, James Caan, that's him. Oh, he gets shot up at the checkpoint. Like, who am I listening to? Or in other cases, you've got Barzini or Bolasso or who did I say? McCluskey, yeah. And you're just like, who are all these people and how should I follow them? Well, the story keeps you engaged with all of these people. You meet them. Coppola does a really good job of showing you someone and then showing you their outcome later, right? So you meet Carlo, who's getting married to Connie, Vito's daughter, right? That's the beginning vignette. And then you see him again once he's, found to be beating Connie, right? Abusing her. And then you see him later and where he gets his comeuppance because he is part of the plot against the Corleone family. So he does a really good job. And then, of course, the baptism scene where the other Dons are murdered in striking fashion. You meet them in like 2 scenes prior where all of the 5 families are coming together. So you know who you're looking at when you have these shots intercut. So I think, from a filmmaking standpoint, Coppola deserves all the accolades, even though he did not win Best Director at the Academy Awards for it. He won Best Adapted Screenplay. That's all you get.
I believe in America. America has made my fortune. And I raised my daughter in the American fashion. I gave her freedom, but I taught her never to dishonor her family. She found a boyfriend, not an Italian. She went to the movies with him. She stayed out late. I didn't protest. 2 months ago, he took her for a drive with another boyfriend. They made her drink whiskey. And then they tried to take advantage of her. She resisted. She kept her honor. So they beat her like an animal. When I went to the hospital, her nose was broken. Her jaw was shattered, held together by wire. She couldn't even weep because of the pain. But I wept. Why did I weep? She was the light of my life. Beautiful girl. Now she will never be beautiful again. Sorry. I went to the police like a good American. These 2 boys were brought to trial. The judge sentenced them to 3 years in prison and suspended the sentence. Suspended the sentence? They went free that very day. I stood in the courtroom like a fool. And those 2 bastards, they smiled at me. Then I said to my wife, for justice, we must go to Don Corleone.
Why did you go to the police? Why didn't you come to me first?
What do you want of me? Tell me anything, but do what I beg you to do.
What is that? That I cannot do.
I'll give you anything you ask.
We've known each other many years, but this is the first time you ever came to me for counsel, for help. I can't remember the last time that you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee. Even though my wife is godmother to your only child. But let's be frank, you never wanted my friendship. And you were afraid to be in my debt.
I didn't want to get into trouble.
I understand. You found paradise in America. Had a good trade, made a good living. Police protected you, and there were courts of law. You didn't need a friend like me. But now you come to me and you say, Don Corleone, give me justice. But you don't ask with respect. You don't offer friendship. You don't even think to call me Godfather. Instead, you come into my house on the day my daughter's to be married and you ask me to do murder for money.
I ask you for justice.
That is not justice. Your daughter is still alive.
Let him suffer then, as she suffers. How much shall I pay you?
Buonasera. Buonasera. What have I ever done to make you treat me so disrespectfully? If you'd come to me in friendship, then the scum that ruined your daughter would be suffering this very day. And if by chance an honest man like yourself should make enemies, then he would become my enemies. And then they would fear you.
Be my friend, Godfather.
Good. Someday, and that day may never come, I'll call upon you to do a service for me. But until that day, accept this justice as a gift on my daughter's wedding day.
Grazie, Godfather.
Great.
What I want to hear from you, John, is we were coming together and thinking about what movie to talk about that sort of best suits your expertise. And from what I thought is that there are a ton of movies that suit your expertise in criminogenic thinking and related ideas. But you came to The Godfather. So you said a little bit about it. What more really prompted you to bring this to the show?
Yeah, I think in addition to just my familiarity with the movie and enjoying it so much, I think it just is a really good example, or it contains a lot of good examples of the kinds of thinking and attitudes and relationships that perpetuate crime, and not just an individual crime, because there's kind of heist movies, right, where they're committing a crime and it's fun to watch. Yeah. And those are cool, but they're very aware they're committing a crime the whole time. Kind of beating the system, playing the system. And I think The Godfather is different because I don't think they see themselves necessarily as criminals. They just see it as they're different, right? They have their different culture. Yeah. And so it's coming at it from a totally different perspective, I think, of not these people living in society and doing this one crime or their final crime, the final bank robbery, whatever it is, so that they can get out. That's not the point of The Godfather. It is the way that these people are, these people who are just so embedded in a life of crime. They're not really looking for a way out. They don't necessarily even want a way out.
I think I want to return to that briefly when we talk about Michael, because it's a really good point. But I also wanted to pick your brain about this film as a gangster mafia movie compared to other ones that have somewhat of a cultural grasp, finger hold, I suppose, on culture. So like Goodfellas. I think when people think of a good mafia movie, they ultimately might think of The Godfather, but they also might think of Goodfellas. So let's do a little compare and contrast here. What does The Godfather have that Goodfellas doesn't?
From a criminal perspective, I think both of them, honestly, if you had said, hey, John, we're not going to do The Godfather, we'll do Goodfellas, I would have been maybe just as happy. Goodfellas is an amazing movie.
Sure.
And so there's so much to speak of there. I think that one of the main differences is, to me, The Godfather is like a top down. So you're looking at the top people in this organizational structure. And there's this deep history, especially if you get into Godfather 2, which I know is not what we're here to talk about, but the prequel kind of part to Godfather 2 really sets the stage of that background and how these people become embedded into this life of crime, where Goodfellas is kind of like a middle section. There are some higher up people in it, but the main people in it are kind of lower level people. Yeah. And they're operating in the system, sometimes not fully integrated into the system. You know, they're not all made men, so to speak. Yeah. So they're kind of these outside admirers who are wanting to get involved and wanting to be a part of it, but they'll never be the people that we get to see in The Godfather.
And I think you bring up a really good point, because Henry Hill, who's a real person, it was not Italian. And they make a point of this with Tom Hagen, Robert Duvall's character. They point it out in The Godfather, and they say, you're not Italian. And even Michael tells him, listen, you're not consigliere anymore because you're not a wartime consigliere. So, you know, have fun in Vegas. Because that's where your job is now. And it's very pointed. You're not Italian, so move on. And it's very true on sort of on a mirrored level there, that like Henry Hill is in Goodfellas is never going to be at the upper echelon because he's not Italian.
Right. And so was it Tommy DeVito? Is that Joe Pesci's character who is Italian, who gets made at one point? Right. That's like such a shining point of pride for Henry Hill and for, I forget Robert De Niro's character's name at the moment, but they were just so proud because it's almost like they got a little bit of an in because their close friend finally made it in. Right. And that was the closest they were going to get.
I like that analysis there. For me, my compare and contrast here has to do with time period. So the Godfather takes place like late 1940s, just after World War II. Michael is returned as a war hero, and then it sort of ends around 1955-ish. So we've got a little bit less than a decade that we are following. Whereas Goodfellas takes more or less place in the time that it was made, right? Late 80s, early 90s. And I think there's a difference there with like the 70s looking back at the 50s, and then a film made in the 90s looking back only a few years. There's a difference in the way that it is characterized and even maybe romanticized. Because we're sitting there cheering for Michael, and the movie ends, spoiler alert, the movie ends with all of these folks coming in and pledging their allegiance to the new Don Corleone. And you're like, oh, well, that last Don was kind of ruthless. He told some guy to cut off a horse's head.
Right.
So, I mean, you're kind of like romanticizing these really bad dudes into this, like, yeah, I think technically they're tragic figures in like writing parlance, but a lot of people see them as heroes. And I don't think you can necessarily see coked up Henry Hill as a hero.
Right. Although it's funny you say that, because I feel like Henry Hill got to where he was because of, that hero mentality of people in The Godfather, right? He aspired to be them.
Yeah.
And in chasing that goal and chasing that dream, he ended up, the coked up guy watching helicopters all day.
Yeah, right. And I think it's funny that because it's based on a real story, whereas The Godfather is, based on fictionalized versions of the Sicilian mafia in New York at the time, probably not too far from the truth, but we'll call it fictional. They know that The Godfather exists in their world because it's real. Like
right.
The film exists because those are real people, which I love. Okay, so we could probably go another hour on this, but let's get to the psych stuff, because otherwise, listeners are going to be like, what did I start listening to? So, right. John, your background is in criminogenic thinking. But you also have a broader background in clinical psychology. So what I'd like is, as myself a learner here, in addition to all of the listeners, could you explain what you mean a little bit more about criminogenic thinking beyond my short little description of it, and how that applies to the setting, the characters in this movie?
Sure. So criminogenic thinking it comes from a cognitive theory. The idea being that our thoughts, our attitudes, our beliefs influence our behavior. And so it's really just taking that general idea and applying it to criminal behavior.
Okay.
It comes from this theory where people went into prisons and interviewed offenders, hundreds of them, and said they think different than us.
Interesting.
This was in the 70s.
Okay.
And then further researchers came along in the 80s and 90s and said, well, they don't really think different than us. They just tend to over-rely on these ways of thinking that we all kind of have.
Okay.
And so I don't know about you, but I certainly have these kind of irresponsible ways of thinking that will sometimes, nudge me to do things that maybe I know I shouldn't do. The classic example is lie and call in sick to work when really you just want to go to a movie or a concert,
Yeah.
And you start justifying it in ways like, well, I'm a hard worker. They rely on me. I deserve the time off, or other people do it. So why shouldn't I? So all of that, I think, is really relatable.
Okay. Yeah.
The
absolutely.
idea is that we all do it. And so in a more extreme form, when you rely on it more, that's really what perpetuates that more recurrent offending behavior. And so that's really the basis of the theory.
Okay. And so if we were to apply this to some characters in the film, we could obviously point to many of the hitmen, but I think I want to focus on some more of the main characters. So how would this apply to, let's say, the Godfather of the movie, Vito Corleone?
Yeah, he definitely ascribes to this drive for control. So it's kind of an attitude, a cognitive pattern of wanting to control everything. He's the big boss, right?
Yeah.
Everything is kind of under his purview, the people that work for him, but not just the people that work. It's not just everyone in his organization. It's his actual family too.
Yeah.
It's his neighborhood. He is in control of all of that. He's in charge. He's in control of police. He's in control of politicians. To some extent, he's trying to be in control of the other, heads of the families. So he's trying to maintain control of everything. And that drive for control is an example of one of these cognitive patterns, these criminogenic forms of thinking.
Don Bassini, I want to thank you for helping me organize this meeting here today. And also the other heads of the 5 families, New York, New Jersey. Carmine Cuneo, from the Bronx and Brooklyn, Philip the Italian. From Staten Island, we have with us Victor Strachey and all the other associates that came as far as from California, Kansas City, and all the other territories of the country. Thank you. How did things ever get so far? I don't know. It was so unfortunate, so unnecessary. Italia lost a son. I lost a son. We're quits. And if Italia agrees, then I'm willing to let things go on the way they were before.
We're all grateful to Don Corleone for calling this meeting. We all know him as a man of his word. A modest man. He'll always listen to reason.
Yes, Don Barzini. He's too modest. He had all the judges and politicians in his pocket. He refused to share them.
When did I ever refuse an accommodation? All of you know me here. When did I ever refuse? Except one time. And why? Because I believe this drug business is going to destroy us in the years to come. I mean, it's not like gambling or liquor or even women, which is something that most people want nowadays, and it's forbidden to them by the bits and avanti of the church. Even the police departments that have helped us in the past with gambling and other things are going to refuse to help us when it comes to narcotics. And I believed that then, and I believe that now.
Times have changed. It's not like the old days, where we can do anything we want. A refusal is not the act of a friend. If Don Corleone had all the judges and the politicians in New York, then he must share them, all of his youth. He must let us draw the water from the well. Certainly he can present a bill for such services. After all, we are not communists.
So would you say that he knows what he is doing is wrong, or in the way that you were describing it earlier, with some of our some of our more benign intrusive thoughts, that he is justifying it in a different way?
I think justifying it. And this is where, take a little step back to Godfather 2, when they show Robert De Niro as Vito Corleone, feeling like he didn't really have a choice, right? He had this really kind of bad situation. And this is part of, there's a theorist, Glenn Walters, who talked about the lifestyle theory of crime. And so it's not just our thoughts, but it's the conditions. So when we talk about what drives crime, it's not just the person, it's not just the way they think, it's not just their personality, but it's also obviously the environment. And so they show Robert De Niro's character as Vito, and he is in a really tough spot, and he can either continue to live as a victim, or what he does is he kind of takes out the mob boss who's operating his area, and he becomes that new boss. And I think if you asked him, he didn't really have a choice. He did what he had to do to survive, to provide for his family. And I think at every turn, as he probably amassed more power and probably became more violent, he saw it as, this is what I have to do to survive, to provide for people. Now I have all these other people working for me. I owe it to them. So I think it's a deep set of rationalizations where at no point did he think of himself as the bad guy. Now, obviously knew he was doing crime, that you can't kind of talk yourself out of that. So he knew what he was doing, but there was always a good reason.
Okay. So the good reason being what then?
I think providing. So providing not just for himself and his family, but also I think there's this idea of criminogenic thinking called mollification. You're kind of mollifying the bad you do by bringing in the good. And so I think a lot of people have this idea that the mafia, they're criminals and they're violent and they do all these things that are clearly criminal and harmful, but they also do a lot of good. They protect the neighborhood. They keep it clean. They bring justice when the justice system fails. That's the whole start of the movie, right? Yeah. You have Bonacera, who comes in talking about how his daughter was beat up by these two guys and she's disfigured. It sounds like a gruesome crime.
Right.
I love America. He says that. It's great.
Yeah.
He goes to court and basically these guys get a slap on the wrist.
Right.
And so he's coming to the Godfather to right the wrong. And so I feel like that really plays into the Godfather's idea of like, look, people need me because the system in America is broken. It's not helping my people. Who's going to help my people? I am. I'm doing good.
So then he imparts some of this wisdom on to Michael Corleone, which I believe is the youngest son of the three, Sonny, Fredo, and Michael. with Connie in there somewhere. Maybe
Right.
she's the youngest. I'm not sure. So what of that? What about what of his father's life, Vito's life, translates to Michael taking on this role? What sort of criminogenic thinking does he bring to the table?
So that's really interesting because I feel like one of the main things about the movie. So when you think about the plot of the movie, it's really about the mafia and the people in power and trying to be taken out and all of that. But one of obviously the main themes is the development of Michael.
Right.
And at the beginning, he doesn't want anything to do with the family business. You know, and not just from him, everyone else kind of is proud of him for it, right? He's the war hero and, you know, he's choosing this other life and that's great. And then he kind of gets pulled into it. And then towards the end, you see his dad saying, "Oh, I never wanted this life for you. You could have been, you know, Governor Corleone." You know, it's a really cool speech. And Michael's response isn't, "Yeah, I'm really disappointed. I wish I didn't have to do this." It's basically saying like, "Well, those people are in power and corrupt, so they're not really better than we are. This is just a different way of doing it."
Yeah.
Again, that's that criminogenic thinking. That's that rationalization of like, yeah, I could have gone this way, which is legit, quote unquote, but they're just as corrupt as we are. So what we're doing is fine.
A weapon planted there for me. Then I'll kill them both.
Hey, what are you gonna do? Nice college boy, huh? Didn't want to get mixed up in the family business? Huh? Now you want to gun down a police captain? Why, because he slapped you in the face a little bit? Huh? What do you think, this is the army where you shoot him a mile away? You gotta get him close like this, and bada bing, you blow their brains all over your nice Ivy League suit. Come here. Mwah! You're taking this very personal. Tom, this is business, and this man is taking it very, very personal.
Where does it say that you can't kill a cop?
Come on, Mikey.
Tom, wait a minute. I'm talking about a cop that's mixed up in drugs. I'm talking about a dishonest cop, a crooked cop who got mixed up in the rackets and got what was coming to him. That's a terrific story. And we have newspaper people on the payroll, don't we, Tom? They might like a story like that.
They might. They just might.
It's not personal, Sonny. It's strictly business.
He makes the decision, though, to kill Sollozzo and McCluskey, right?
Yeah.
And McCluskey is the police chief?
Captain?
Or is he a captain? Okay.
I want to say captain, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I wasn't too sure about that one either, and I don't know if I want to look at Wikipedia to find out what that specifically is. And so he makes up. He's like, no, it has to be a double tap, right? It has to be taking their lives, and we need to figure out when and how. And Sonny doesn't want him to do it. Sonny's like, no, we'll figure out a different way. Michael, you stay out of this. You know, it's not for you. But Michael says, no, I have to do this. I have to do this. They won't be expecting it from me. So I have to do this. What is he thinking about in that moment, based on your research and your experience? Why does he think he needs to take this mantle?
I think he believes what he says. I think he believes that security is so tight around Sollozzo that no one else can really do it. He is a civilian. I think Tom Hagen uses that term describing Michael. You know, they're worried about Michael's safety. He goes, don't worry about it. He's a civilian. They're not going to come after him. And so maybe he's right, but I think he's convinced himself that this is their one shot. And not only that, he's convinced himself that this is the only way to protect their dad. That's his whole reason for doing it. He's doing it because they know they're going to come after the Godfather again. And so this is the only way to stop him. He sees himself as the only option to save his dad. And during that, you can see he's not looking upset, but everybody kind of knows he's upset, right? He was embarrassed. He was hurt. He was punched in the face. And that looked pretty brutal. I mean, that bruise was in for the whole time he was in Sicily. He had this bruise on his face.
Right.
And so Sonny, of all people, basically says like, oh, you get slapped around a little bit and now you want to go out and get revenge, which is exactly what Sonny would do. But he's telling Michael, like, you need to cool it. And Michael's response is, this is not personal, right? This is business. It's not personal.
Which is again, one of the famous lines. That
classic line and classic
quote.
Rationalization, talking about criminogenic thinking. You can, if it's just business, it's fine, right? We're not acting with emotions here. It's totally permissible because kind of all's fair in business within this culture.
Sure. Like, I mean, a lot of our cultural understanding of hitmen come from the mafia and mafia hitmen, right? And it's just a business to all of them. And then, of course, it's expanded out into these people who are like do anything for hire, spies and all of that. And it's expanded beyond mafia. But I think those were the first cultural things that we all go, okay, yeah, these are people who do this killing and it's just business.
Yeah. It's just business, and that's acceptable. And there are some rules around what's acceptable and what's not. But then when you kind of look at it, you realize those are kind of flimsy rules that people are willing to bend when it suits them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, almost anything is justifiable under the guise of this is a savvy business move.
Right. So I want to contrast then Michael's decision to take out Sollozzo and McCluskey, because he's a war hero, right? And he fought in World War II. So he most definitely, if he was in combat, killed other people. So what's the difference here? Why would his family, let's just say Sonny, for example, be so concerned about him going and engaging in this when he already has experienced this kind of trauma?
I think it's all about once you cross this line, there's no going back. Once you're in, there's no getting out. So it wasn't so much, I think if they really looked at the situation, that it would be exposing him to something solely different.
Mm-hmm.
I forget who was that said it. It's different shooting at somebody from far away like you do in a war versus up close, 2 in the head kind of thing.
Right.
But I don't think it's the brutality or the violence that they were trying to protect him from. I think it was the idea of once you come into this, this thing of ours, you're not getting back out. And so you could stay as a war hero and part of mainstream society and respected, or you could come across here and then you're stuck. And I think that's what they were trying to protect him from.
Yeah. And he, of course, had to give up his life once he goes through with it because he has to go hide in Sicily.
Right.
So I have a related question for you. So you mentioned external conditions for both Vito and I think to some extent Michael. I think the fact that an assassination attempt on his father and him being very close to death, I think that's a reasonable, so to speak, external event that causes follow-ups.
For sure.
What about personality? Does this play a role in this kind of thinking?
Absolutely. So that lifestyle theory talks about conditions, and usually we think of conditions as environmental, but it also mentions internal conditions. Mm-hmm. So that gets to this idea of personality.
Yeah.
And personality is one of the things that drives criminogenic thinking. So we look at the relationship between things, most popularly, I would say, is psychopathy.
Okay.
So we label people as a psychopath. Well, what do psychopaths do? Well, they think in ways that perpetuate their behavior. Oftentimes those are criminogenic ways of thinking. Mm-hmm. And so it is, absolutely fun to think about this cast of characters and think, what are the personality determinants that are perpetuating their behaviors, either through thought or through attitudes or just ways of interacting. And so, you can kind of go down the list and say, well, this person, you see this, and this person. And we don't really get into diagnoses. So a psychopath is not an official diagnosis in the DSM.
Right. Yeah.
So it's more, and personalities in general, we think of as traits. So people have higher levels of this and lower levels of that, and it can become a diagnosis in certain conditions. But I think that we can see a lot of these traits across several of these people.
Okay. So let's take Vito, for example. So psychopathy is generally like remorselessness, lack of empathy, callousness, related words, right?
Yes.
And one of the things that I extracted from here, and it's like one of the things that jumps out at me, and I don't know why, because I don't study this kind of stuff, but it has to do with masculinity and power and control. And you've already mentioned this power and control. It's like one of the defining features of Vito in this movie versus the prequel bits of The Godfather 2, where he's sort of has a lack of control. So he wants to rectify that situation from the prequel bits of 2 into where we see him as an older man played by Marlon Brando. And so he slaps, so somebody's crying in his office. I think it's the actor.
Johnny Fontaine.
Yeah, Johnny Fontaine. And he's crying on his desk. This is the wedding day, so he has to, so Vito has to accept any proposal or any request. One of those rules, right? That, if it didn't suit somebody at any given time, maybe you could abandon that, right? Right. But he accepts it. But Johnny's crying on his desk, and Vito grabs him and shakes him and slaps him around. And he's like, "That is not a man. What you're doing right now is not manly." And I'm paraphrasing here, but like he's railing against him for expressing emotion. Would you say that this is an observable behavior of Vito's personality when it comes to psychopathy, maybe?
I think it's part of the personality. I also think it just reflects the culture at the time.
Sure.
And also amongst Italian Americans at that time.
Okay.
And so expressing emotions, he basically says, "You're crying like a woman."
Oh, yeah.
As he's yelling at him, he says, "You cry like a woman." the idea is that's weak. So you're showing emotions, you're weak.
Mm-hmm.
You're showing vulnerability, you're weak. I think part of it is not just that he's crying. I think if he came in, I lost my wife or kids and was crying, it would have been different. But it's kind of like a whiny crying, like, oh, I don't know what to do. And I think Vito, that gets to his idea of like control and masculinity and being powerful.
Okay.
And so he sees Johnny Fontaine in that moment, not just crying, but crying because he's weak and he's uncertain and he's just like a lack of boldness.
Mm-hmm.
And he just can't stand it. He loves Johnny Fontaine. It's his godson, and he's going to do whatever favor he needs to do to get his career on track.
Right.
But I think it really is grating on his nerves that there's this kind of whiny kid in his office saying, Godfather, I don't know what to do. And Vito just slaps him because he can't take it.
Yeah.
I think it just rubs him the wrong way.
Well, there's another personality trait that I guess maybe that, I actually take your point here. It's probably less along the lines of psychopathy and more like stop being a baby. Maybe use less forceful language, calling him a woman when he's obviously not. But maybe it's more along the lines of Machiavellianism.
Right. So I'm glad you bring that up because psychopathy is one of what we call the dark triad. And there's actually different ways of looking at this. And all of this gets very complicated. Psychopathy has, is it one thing? Is it a 2-factor? Is it a 4-factor? But there's narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy, which are seen as 3 related and overlapping but distinct groupings of personality traits. And I think when you look at a good, successful mafia boss, they probably have all 3 of these, but what makes them really successful is that Machiavellianism. It's deceitful, it's manipulative, it's shrewd and pragmatic, it's putting the interests of the self and the family above everybody else's. And I think Vito embodies this. He's so savvy. And I don't know that we get this in the start of the movie. He just seems kind of like, he's a little ruthless, but he almost is just like a sweet grandfatherly guy. But for me, when I first really realized how sharp and shrewd he is when he comes out of the meeting with all 5 bosses and he tells Michael, I didn't know it was Barzini until this day. He just picks up on these subtle things that to me, I wouldn't have necessarily known that. But he picks up on these things. And not only does he notice it, but he knows how to get done what needs to be done in a way that I really think showcases that Machiavellianism.
Zini will move against you first. He'll set up a meeting with someone that you absolutely trust, guaranteeing your safety. And at that meeting, you'll be assassinated. I like to drink wine more than I used to. Anyway, I'm drinking more.
It's good for you, Bob.
I don't know. Your wife and children, are you happy with them?
Very happy.
That's good. I hope you don't mind the way I keep going over this Barzini business.
No, not at all.
It's an old habit. I spend my life trying not to be careless. Women and children can be careless, but not men. How's your boy?
He's good.
He looks more like you every day.
He's smarter than I am. 3 years old, he can read the funny papers.
Read the funny papers. I want you to arrange to have a telephone man. Check all the calls that go in and out of here.
I did it already, Bob.
Could be
Pop,
anyone.
I took care of that.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
What's the matter? What's bothering you? I'll handle it. I told you I can handle it. I'll handle it.
I knew that Santino was going to have to go through all this. And Fredo. Oh. Fredo was. Oh. And I never wanted this for you. I worked my whole life. I don't apologize to take care of my family. And I refused to be a fool. Dancing on the string held by all those big shots. I don't apologize, that's my life, but I thought that when it was your time that you would be the one to hold the strings. Senator Corleone, Governor Corleone, something.
Another Pezzanovanta.
Oh. This wasn't enough time, Michael. Wasn't enough time.
We'll get there, Pop. We'll get there.
Now listen, whoever comes to you with this Barzini meeting, he's a traitor. Don't forget that.
Yeah, and if not for his heart attack based on complications from getting shot several times in the
Right.
torso, I think he probably would have been the one to take care of the Five Family situation, or Barzini just by himself. But because this whole plot is to not only take out Vito, but also to take out Michael at the at this point in time, especially after Sollozzo and McCluskey murders, that it's just like all bets are off. And so Vito dies of a heart attack playing with Anthony, Michael's son. The little boy who played Anthony, boy, I gotta say, so this is a little bit of filmmaking things that just pull me out of the movie sometimes. Just any old movie where there's like a bad child actor.
Right.
Because the boy who plays Anthony is just like, this is so fun. And then anybody that age, yeah, granted, they would probably be very confused, but if they saw their grandfather fall, they would not be like, oh my God, which is what you can hear in like the background. That's what the sound mixing was. And this child actor had no direction on what to do. You would think that like this little boy would run for the closest other adult.
Right. No, he hangs out, he laughs, and then he eventually runs off, kind of in a happy spirited way.
Grandpa fell asleep.
Right. I think he says, does he say he's silly or something? He's silly.
But it's so funny because it's not even that kid. It's I mean, it probably is that kid, but that was like ADR, and it was put into the sound mixing because he's not even saying anything in that moment like that.
Right.
As far as like filmmaking goes, it's probably the worst bit of the film is you see someone as big as, especially he bulked up for the role, but somebody as big as Marlon Brando in both stature and fame just like fall over, and you don't direct this kid to have any more. He's so silly. It's just, it takes me out of the movie every single time. Luckily, they cut away from it pretty quickly to the funeral, and you're like, oh, okay, he died.
Right.
He didn't die the first time when he got shot, but now he's definitely dead.
Yeah.
That's my favorite. But I want to talk about the baptism scenes, because I think we're moving. I think that mention of the Machiavellianism in Vito and the Five Families meeting just rolls really nicely into the baptism intercutting. So Michael is asked to be the godfather. Roll credits of one of Connie's sons. Is also named Michael?
I don't remember.
I don't remember either. You can let us know in the comments. But he is asked to be this godfather, and so of course he accepts. That's what Vito had to do for probably more than just Johnny Fontaine, right? He probably was a godfather to a lot of people. But to be a godfather, you essentially have to be baptized at the same time as this new child in sort of a taking the vow kind of way. Obviously, Michael was baptized as a Catholic when he was
it's kind of reaffirming your beliefs, reaffirming your stance.
Right. With just phrases. And so Coppola, in probably one of the best edited, obviously he didn't do the editing himself, but he was in the room where it happened. He's the one who put the sequence here, and it was just edited so well, of Michael reaffirming his beliefs and his vows, right? Juxtaposed with the remaining 4 Dons getting murdered. 4 hits, 4 Dons, plus what's his face? Mo Green. So we've got 5 hits happening all at the same time, where Michael is reaffirming his faith in God, which comes with the responsibility of being a follower of Christ and a member of the Catholic community where they're at. And those two things are incompatible with each other, right? They're you can't order the hit on 5 different people while also saying I am a child of God and expect to go to heaven within the faith, right? So my question to you, John, is what about this scene cements Michael as the new Godfather as he is introduced at the end of the film?
Michael Francis Rizzi, do you renounce Satan?
I do renounce him.
And all his works? baptized? In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Michael Rizzi, go in peace, and may the Lord be with you. Amen.
I think for me, when I see that, it really highlights the fact that he was kind of made for this position. And so the whole rest of the movie, I don't know that we're as convinced as an audience, and certainly nobody else in it is convinced either. So he goes from the war hero who is the kid, and yeah, he can take out 2 people at a restaurant, but then we got to rush him off to Sicily so we can protect him.
Mm-hmm.
And then even when he comes back, he's kind of taken over the family business with his dad, whispering in his ear and guiding him.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody has confidence in his ability except for Vito, who says, I completely trust Michael. But you see, who is it, Tessio and Clemenza, towards the end, they're asking, can we make our own families? And they kind of go around to Michael and ask the Godfather, Don Vito, do we have your blessing? And he says, if Michael's okay with it, I am too. And they kind of say, Michael, we're losing power. Or the family's going to die soon. And it's because of Michael. That's the sense you get, is Michael is weak. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's inexperienced. And then you have this amazing scene. And he just says, don't worry, there's things in play that it'll all be taken care of. And that's it. He doesn't let anyone on the plan. And then you see this amazing thing that he's orchestrated, where not only does he return to the former glory of his father, but he takes out all the competition.
Yeah.
While he's sitting there, yes, reaffirming these beliefs that should be diametrically opposed to all the things that he's doing.
Yeah.
And I don't think he's doing it lightly. And I say that because when Connie asked him, it was Kay who actually said, Connie asked if you'd be the Godfather.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't go, oh yeah, sure, no problem.
Mm-hmm.
He says, I'll think about it.
Yeah.
It's a serious commitment.
Right.
And he doesn't want to take it lightly. And just knowing about Catholicism and Italians, it's part of their culture.
Mm-hmm.
There is no opting out of it. You can't say, oh no, because of the stuff I do, it doesn't really fit for me. That's who you are. That's what your family does. And it's a serious thing. So the fact that he can do both of these things at the same time and really takes over so well and cements himself as the head of the family with no competition, I think just showcases just his amazing ability to get stuff done in a way that is kind of chilling if you think about it.
Yeah. And I think we learn more about that aspect of him in Godfather Part 2, but the way that you characterize it is so good because he can do both things at the same time, and they are diametrically opposed, is what you said. And I think that is cognitive dissonance visualized. This intercutting by Coppola just shows the 2 beliefs and acting on the behavior. He's choosing to be at the baptism instead of participating in these hits, which is, probably the best bet for him. But he also has to hold those 2 competing beliefs in his mind. And what's the easier thing to do, as Festinger said in the 1950s, in and around the same time, by the way, he said it's easier to change your thoughts than it is to change your behavior. And that's what most people do with cognitive dissonance. And that brings us back to how we started this conversation, which was justifying that he was doing it all for the right reasons, or the reasons that are in support of his family, or in support of his, or avenging his father, or avenging his brother, right? I also wanted to add, with the whole, people who are just discounting Michael this entire time, which is, not a good idea to do in any kind of story. It always ends badly for people who discount others, right? Who underestimate. Mo Green was the other one that underestimated, along with Fredo. We haven't said much about Fredo. He doesn't come up too much until Godfather Part 3. And, we all know... I know it was you, Fredo, which is probably the only part I like to watch of Godfather 3. The rest is no thanks.
Although you gotta just when I thought I was out, they pulled me back in. That's those great line from 3.
Those 2 things, and that's 1990s Al Pacino right there.
Yeah,
which he's 72 to 90. What happened? He just got grizzly and he got gray, and it was like, wait, what? But yeah, those 2 bits. And then the rest of the movie I could probably leave. But I do love 2. In any case, Mo Green is like, you're not going to take this casino away from me. I made this. Who are you? You're Michael Corleone.
Yeah. You don't buy me out. I buy you out. That's his line, yelling at Michael.
Yeah. And, Michael's just sitting there yep, okay, keep underestimating me. See how that works out for you.
Yeah. And I think we see that same approach actually in the beginning of when Tom Hagen goes out to Hollywood and meets with the person for Johnny Fontaine, we see the same thing.
Yeah.
And, I'll listen to you out. I respect you, but then ends up yelling at Tom Hagen, and Tom doesn't argue. He just says, thank you for the lovely meal. And both of them know, okay, you just solidified it.
Yeah.
I gave you your chance to make a good choice. You could have walked away with some money or a good deal. And now bad things are going to happen.
Yeah. You're going to wake up with a horse head in your bed.
Right.
The first time I saw that scene was not when watching the movie. It was outside of that. I don't know how, because this was well before like YouTube or whatever, where you could have like clips of anything. But yeah, I saw that scene maybe on like a clip show or something. So it was probably blurred or whatever. I'm like, oh, snap. Right. And then I watched it in context, and it happens very early in the film because it happens right after the wedding, right? A little vignette there. Tom Hagen goes to Hollywood. Vignette done when you hear a grown man screaming at the top of his lungs because he's got a horse head in his bed, and he's just like, what's all this blood? How drunk were you, dude?
Right, that someone could sneak a horse head. And fun fact, that was an actual horse head. That was not a prop. They didn't kill a horse for it, but there was, I think, a dog food processing plant nearby where they had horse meat in the dog food, and so they got a horse head. And I don't know if this part is true or not, but apparently the actor who played Jack Waltz didn't know that it was going to be a real horse head. So allegedly his scream is kind of legit because he didn't expect an actual horse head in his bed. I don't know if that's true, but it's fun to believe it's true anyway.
Yeah, I will agree with you on that. I think it's more fun to believe that it's true, that those screams that he's doing that like echo through the house, and then as the camera pulls away from the house, you can still hear it. Like his neighbors could hear him screaming. He was that loud. I choose to believe that he didn't know it was going to be real.
Absolutely.
In the same way that little kid was not given any direction on how to respond to Marlon Brando going to the ground.
We'll believe what makes us happy.
Yes, exactly.
You think I'm skimming off the top, Mike?
You're unlucky.
You goddamn guineas really make me laugh. I do you a favor and take Freddie in when you're having a bad time, and then you try to push me out.
Wait a minute. You took Freddie in because the Corleone family bankrolled your casino because the Molinari family on the coast guaranteed his safety. Now, we're talking business. Let's talk business.
Yeah, let's talk business, Mike. First of all, you're all done. The Corleone family don't even have that kind of muscle anymore. The Godfather is sick, right? You're getting chased out of New York by Barzini and the other families. What do you think is going on here? You think you can come to my hotel and take over? I talked to Barzini. I can make a deal with him and still keep my hotel.
Is that why you slap my brother around in public?
Oh, no, that was nothing, Mike. Now, Mo didn't mean nothing by that. Sure, he flies off the handle once in a while, but Mo and me were good friends, right, Mo, huh?
I got a business to run. I got to kick asses sometimes to make it run right. We had a little argument Freddie and I, so I had to straighten him out.
You straightened my brother out?
He was banging cocktail waitresses 2 at a time. Players couldn't get a drink at the table. What's wrong with you?
I leave for New York tomorrow. Think about a price.
Do you know who I am? I'm Mo Green. I made my bones when you were going out with cheerleaders.
Wait a minute, Mo. I get an idea. Tom, you're the consigliere. Now, you can talk to the Don. You can explain.
Just a minute. Don is semi-retired, and Mike is in charge of the family business now. If you have anything to say it to Mike.
Mike, you don't come to Las Vegas and talk to a man like Mo Green like that.
Fredo, you're my older brother, and I love you. But don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again.
Let's end here with our thoughts on La Casa Nostra. There we go. Which means it's our thing. So you alluded to this a little bit throughout our discussion. So what do you think is the legacy of the mob, the mafia, the culture brought over from Sicily into the United States? What do you think is the lasting legacy of a film like The Godfather on American culture as we go forward? It's a sort of a heady question, and so I do apologize, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
I think to me, it's an example of a counterculture where America is this great land of opportunity for people. That's why people came over, especially during that time. It was, the streets were paved with gold, right? They were led to believe they could become anything. And then they found out for a lot of people that wasn't really the case. There was discrimination. They remained in poverty. There were abuses happening. And so people found ways to make it work. And to me, this is almost a symbol of hope. The mafia is almost a symbol of hope for people. You can bind with a group. You can make your own rules. You can operate outside the law. You can influence the law. They have the politicians in their pockets and the police. And so it becomes a way of getting what you need and righting wrongs and having a piece of that American pie, even if it wasn't really meant for you. And so I think a lot of people overly romanticize the mafia because, it's cool in one way, but it's not cool because it's violent. It's not cool because it's, drug running or whatever it is. It's cool because it's an in-group, out-group kind of thing. It's your people. It's mysterious. They don't let everyone in. And once you're in, you're privy to all kinds of things going on behind the scene. And so I think all of that sense of mystery and power and control and the riches that come with it, I think can be really alluring to people.
I've got a off-the-wall question for you in addition to what I just asked. So do you think in our splintered, maybe monoculture, that the mafia still exists and operates in the way that is portrayed in this movie?
Like a literal still operating?
A literal mafia, yeah.
So I don't know. I feel like it's harder and harder to get away with things, right? So it's kind of like, you see the old West movies where they just run into a bank and start shooting the place up. And now we have cameras and DNA. I feel like obviously people are going to continue to get away with stuff. And the more you're organized and planful, the more likely you're going to get those things done. But I think, when you look at The Godfather and even up through Goodfellas, there was a lot more leeway to get away with things than I think there probably are nowadays. And so I think the mafia, to that extent, it's just harder. It's harder to do. Corruption obviously is still alive and well. So I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not, at least it's not as in your face as it was back then, for sure.
Yeah, so I guess I guess a corollary to my question would be, with the way you described it as a counterculture and more fiercely dependent on customs and mores and norms brought over from Italian immigrants, right? Who found that they were treated less than by their white counterparts emigrating from Ireland or Germany or wherever, right? Who are considered to be more European or whiter, right? And therefore in the majority or by virtue of having whiter skin, more powerful, right? More innately powerful, that in our current culture that those things still exist. Does that make sense? Like in the 1950s, it was very easy to spot an Italian immigrant community, right? Is it as easy to spot now? And is it as cohesive as it used to be, and thus giving rise to this counterculture as you described? I think that's more or less my question.
Yeah, I think you hit on something important. I think when Italians came over here in the earlier 1900s, they were not considered white, and so they were not allowed to integrate. And Irish people, obviously, skin-wise, very white, but were also not allowed to integrate.
Yeah, very true, and that's because they were Catholic.
Right.
Very, very similar, and possibly even an additional issue for Italian immigrants.
Yeah, and so I think as Italians have basically become white, I think there's less of that separating off into our neighborhood. And so my grandparents, they bought a place in Brooklyn, I don't even know when, before my parents were born, so maybe in the 40s, and I would go hang out on the stoop, and it was great. And they would talk about, I remember when the whole neighborhood was all Italian, and it's not anymore. And it's a lot of different people who are living in the neighborhood, but it literally was a time when every person walking up and down the street was Italian. And I think as Italian people became less discriminated against and more integrated into the culture, not that they didn't need each other as much, but they didn't need each other as much for survival. And so the need for the mafia to be an advocate for the people went away. And is it still there for profits and all that? Correct? I mean, probably. I don't know. That's not my expertise.
Racketeering. Right. I mean, the RICO of it all, right?
Yes.
The racketeering, the organized crime, all of that,
Absolutely.
Right? Intimidation.
But the idea of protection for our people and our neighborhoods, I think, has gone away.
Yeah. And I would say that maybe a lot less of the family aspect of it too, which was so rich in this movie, may have also disappeared as many of these families. So where did your parents end up settling? They grew up in Brooklyn, but did they move out?
Yeah, they grew up in Brooklyn, and then my mom moved to Staten Island, and then as they got older, they actually moved to Columbia, Missouri, which is how I ended up in this area. So I think a lot of that has happened.
Yeah, so it breaks apart those bonds. Not to say that the movie doesn't show that either. Fredo's in Las Vegas for the majority of the decade that we follow the family in the first film, and they go back and forth on rickety old planes, back and forth between the East Coast and Las Vegas. But it's less scattered, right?
Yeah.
You know, Michael takes over we assume Michael takes over the Corleone family residence. Connie doesn't live too far away. Sonny didn't live too far away. Now his widow doesn't live too far away either. And many cousins and other such folks live in the area, and that's how, as you've described, that's how this protection kind of evolved. So yeah, I was just musing about how the movie not only is set in a particular time period, but also reflects that time period.
Mm-hmm.
And though I will always argue that this is a timeless masterpiece, it does at times feel a little bit dated. And I think that's because of a shifting culture in the 50 plus years since the movie came out.
Yeah, I think that it's pretty true to the times, but we're just so far removed from those times now. It feels like you're watching a different world where, growing up, even watching it in the 80s, it wasn't that long ago, that these events had actually happened, where now it was a really long time ago.
Yeah. And I feel like it's closer to American experience than, say, going to the movies in the 1950s and watching a Western, because those were lots of decades before. Right. Even D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation, which came out in 1915, was 60 years removed from the Civil War, 50 years, something like that. I don't know. I can't do adding right now, but it's kind of like the difference between us now watching The Godfather to when it came out, but also 20 years prior to that was the setting of the movie. So it's an even longer distance, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
But it feels like the same going to the movies in the 50s and watching a movie set in the 1860s in Nevada or Utah or California during the Wild West times. So culture's changing so fast, I think, that we have to remind ourselves that how things used to be, I guess.
Yeah. I think when I first put it on, I was getting my kids ready for bed, and I wasn't going to start watching it, but I had it queued up, and it was a couple opening scenes, and they just saw the cars, and they were like, how old is this movie? It was mind-blowing to them that these were real things.
Yeah. And they look like that, and you put on Godfather 2 and you go back even further, right? And what it looked like in Italy at the time, which I think is a great foray into that part of the past.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank Dr. John Mandracchia for joining me to discuss The Godfather. Before we say goodbye, John, I'd like to give my guests a space for anything they'd like to plug. Where can folks find out more about your work? And I know I have a lot of my own students who are interested in this kind of thinking, but also they want to be clinicians as well. So what do you say?
Yeah, I don't have a very strong presence out there on the internet. I don't have a lot of social media for professional interests. So I would say the best spot to access any of my works would be through ResearchGate, publications and things like that. But I'm also happy to respond to questions or talk about The Godfather or other movies or psychology through email. And that's john.mandracchia@avila.edu. Hopefully that's posted somewhere for people so I don't have to spell it. I will. I always have to spell my last name every time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have that problem.
It sounds nice.
But I sympathize with those that do. Yes, I will link your ResearchGate and your email in the show notes so people can click right on that and reach out to you if they have any more questions, because I think, you're not too far away. Avila, for folks who are not familiar, is in Kansas City. I'm based in Central Illinois. It's a 6-hour drive. So it's not that far. And I think that, and I've told this to your colleague is Jordan Waggy, who's a friend of the show. I've said this to her before, but your program is on my list for my students. If they're willing to go to Missouri, and if they're willing to go to the other side of Missouri from the closest city, which is St. Louis, to us, then I think it's worth a shot to apply to your program. especially if they're interested in this, because then they get to ask you questions and pick your brain about this and do research on this, because you do share some of this research every once in a while at places like MPA.
Right, which is where we met. And I appreciate the plug for Avila. I think we have a pretty great program. Kansas City's, I love Kansas City. I know a lot of people really do. And then, a lot of the training programs, you don't necessarily get exposure to research. And we have a couple different folks who have active research going on. So it's come here for the counseling, stay for the research.
Exactly. Thanks for joining me, John.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And that's going to do it for this episode. Until the next one, thanks for listening.